Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. How is everybody? Happy April. We made it through 3 months so far. It doesn't feel like it. I don't know if 2025 feels longer or shorter, but we've done it. We're in April. I hope everybody's having a good April so far. We're only, 4 days in? I hope you guys enjoyed last week's episode about an amazing Floridian woman. I actually got a lot of good feedback from that episode, so thank you guys. Thanks to everybody who's reached out on all the social media pages. You guys are awesome as always. Love the memes, love sharing it. And anybody who's reached out on TikTok, you're just awesome. And the YouTube page. Yeah, I didn't expect that to go as good as it's been going, so I appreciate all the love on that as well. I'm really only here because of you guys, and I don't feel like I say thank you enough, so thank you. If you guys ever want to hear about a certain topic, reach out, say hi. You can hit me up on any of the social medias or thatfloridafeel@gmail.com. I love hearing from you guys. I love hearing suggestions, just saying hi. It's always great to hear from you all. If you've not checked out Unfiltered Studios, it's the podcast group I'm a part of. Amazing people doing amazing things over there. So definitely check it out, especially if you're looking for something new or something different. Just head on over and check it out, and you will find pretty much something for everybody over there. So today we are going to talk about something that Florida, you've probably heard of this town in Florida. You might not have realized it was a town. You probably thought it was something else. And I'm talking about Raiford. Now, when I think of Raiford, you probably don't think of a town. You probably think of a prison. But Raiford is actually a town. Raiford is a town in Union County, Florida. And unfortunately, though, it is known for correctional institutes because there are 3 correctional institutes in the town. And the very first one was the Florida State Prison. And that was really kind of where it came from. Union Correctional Institute holds the state's death row for men. That's another one. The town, though, does have more than just correctional institutes. They also have a Masonic Lodge, a Raiford Lodge number 82, which is under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Florida. They have people that live there. Around 2020, the census was close to 250 people at the time. So it's not a huge town, but it is a town. It does hold its charm, and it's been around for quite a while. So I thought we would talk about Raiford, and of course we will talk about what it's better known for. So actually around 1895, long time ago, 1895, the first non-indigenous people to settle the area was actually a man named Hunter Warren Raiford, who was involved in the naval stores business. Around 1900, the Atlantic Coastline Railroad was actually built through the settlements where Mr. Raiford had decided to be, and a post office was built with the community being named after Raiford. Hunter Warren Raiford himself would serve as the first postmaster. In 1939, Raiford Prison baseball team set a record for consecutive scoreless innings at 52. The municipality was officially incorporated as the town of Raiford many, many years later in August of 1971. So this town was around for almost 100 years before they decided to officially name it a town. Like I said, it does sit in Union County, and it has been around for quite a while. It is in the northern part of Florida. In fact, it sits very close to Duval and Clay counties, so very northern Florida. So it does get warm, cold, seasons, all the above. Like I said, there's not a ton of people that live up there. It's a very, very small town. It does have its charm, but it is mostly known for its correctional institutes. The Union Correctional Institute, as well as the Florida State Prison, are both in Raiford. Now, these institutions were originally one institution, believe it or not. The Union Correctional Institute was in unincorporated Union County, and then the Florida State Prison was right across in Bradford County line. They became one. Now you're in Raiford. UCI, which was the Union Correctional Institute, was the state's first prison, and that was where we got, the original Florida State Prison. The name went with the newer institute, which is where you now have a Florida State Prison. And that's what happened when they were split. So originally one, now two. One is still called Florida State Prison. One is now Union Correctional Institute. Both do house death row inmates, though. Whereas the Florida State Prison actually conducts the executions, and the Union Correctional Institute is where they just simply house them. The Union Correctional does have the more diverse population of any correctional institute in the state of Florida. It houses close management inmates, mental inmates, and as well as open population inmates. Most are over the latter age of 50, so the older inmates. Whereas Florida State Prison houses the violent or criminally insane in solitary confinement, as well as death row. So you can see two different diverse things. The penitentiary compound encompasses over 50 acres. It also includes a farm, where a lot of the food is grown. This is still Florida State Prison, sorry. And of course, nearby are the state's training facilities for the correctional officers' housing and the warden's house. So let's actually talk about these two places. So first is the Union Correctional Institute, which was formerly referred to as the Florida State Prison, commonly referred to as Raiford Prison, which is where most people think of when they say Raiford. And this is a Florida Department of Corrections state prison located in unincorporated Union County near Raiford. This one officially opened in 1913, and the prison has expanded and restructured many times. The state prison farm was one of the last prisons in the U.S. to abolish the practice of convict leasing all the way in 1923, which is very late because I know some states stopped way before 1900. In 1955, the first buildings of the East Unit were established, actually in Bradford County, which is just south of where it is in Union County. In July of 1972, the East Unit became the new Florida State Prison, which is what we'll talk about in a second, and the old prison was redesigned as the Union Correction Institute, which is the one I'm talking about now. Very confusing at first. When I was researching this, I'm like, couldn't you have just named them completely different names and not said old and new, just not even tried that? But as of 2016, Union remains one of the largest prisons in the Florida system. It houses a maximum capacity of 2,172 adult male prisoners in all security levels, maximum, close, medium, minimum, and all the way out into the community. So, lots and lots of people. It was Florida's largest and oldest correctional institute, as it was established in 1913 to house infirm inmates who could not be leased to private businesses, which is basically convict leasing. The initial population was about 600 inmates, and that actually was mixed, so male and female. It was given the official name of Raiford Penitentiary, and the facility was almost exclusively as a state prison farm. So even though they were farmed out, it wasn't the same as some going to private businesses. It's very strange to kind of explain this, so I'm not going to go into full detail, because then that would be half the podcast. The population at the facility, though, remained fairly constant during its early years, sticking at around 600. The number of inmates needed for the farm would kind of dictate the initial capacity for the prison, so however many people they needed was however full the prison was. In January of 1919, Captain J.S. Blitch, I did say Blitch, that's with an L, was appointed warden and attempted to bring positive change into the facility. Okay, so he's trying. It's still prison. The inmates were rewarded for their labors in the field. They were given theatrical productions and weekly baseball games. This is really where the baseball games started. However, it continued reports of guards beating inmates, kind of still soured that positive image that he was trying to turn. Brutal treatment of inmates in convict leasing systems would eventually lead abandonment of convict lease in 1923, which is when they really stopped being a farm prison and just became a prison. So no more using the prisoners to create labor for something. It's just now you're in a prison. By the early 1920s, the large state prison farm property was about 4,000 acres under cultivation, kept large part by the prisoners. Also, the property was a shoe factory that made 10 pairs of shoes a day. but the living conditions were obviously very poor. Women lived in horrid conditions, housed separately from the overcrowded men, but they were still in overcrowded and wooden dormitories. A 1928 report on the American penal system shows that 1,101 male prisoners received that. Out of all those, 674 were African American and 427 white. Segregation did exist at this point in all aspects of the prison life. That included working areas, hospitals, bathrooms, eating areas, and anything else you could think of. So this was a very interesting prison when it was still in use for labor. Now, of course, when they stopped using convict leasing, that always leads to an increase in inmate population. And it also leads to a structure change, because now you have all this land that you're not going to use anymore and you can do something with it. So in 1927, a licensed tag factory was constructed because they didn't need it for cultivating anymore. And it was basically they just gave the extensive production line to the prison. And the main housing unit, which is known as the Rock, was built in 1928, which was one of the reasons that Raiford's population just increased. And the building was really kept in use until 1985, and it was only closed because of a court order, which tells you how bad this place was. And it was demolished in 1999. So it sat unused from 85 to 99. So not only was it bad, they just let it rot with prisoners around for years. Sounds like Florida. Of course, though, going way back, by 1932, the inmate population soared all the way up to 2,000. They had a mess hall, an auditorium, and a library to be added. And the expanding prison also added a laundry and shirt factory at this time. They have all these people. They're trying to do something with them. Eventually, they added a maximum security building that was called the Flat Top in 1935. And this was actually vital for the center because that meant that it would be from then on maximum security. So from then on, Raiford is always going to be a maximum security prison. They also added a West unit, which was to house female offenders, which was in use until 1954 when the Florida Correctional Institute in Ocala opened, and that's where female inmates were transferred from Raiford to the new facility in Ocala. So it was still a mixed gender prison up until 1954, which is crazy to me. In 1955, they opened a new maximum security facility it was called the East Unit. Everything has to have a name. Then the East Unit became a separate institution in 1972 named the Florida State Prison. Again, this is where we're starting to split in between the two prisons because they realized there's just too many people it's just too much. In 1972, when it did become Florida State Prison, the original site kept the new name of the Union Correctional Institution with the Flat Top and all the other fun names. They have decided to name things the Rock and all the other units. But before, it's not without its incidents. I mean, obviously no prison's a great place. And there were always incidents. There were always issues. We already talked about how the one guy tried to come in and do positive change, and there was just there was horrible living conditions and there was beatings. In fact, in 1983, a corrections officer was stabbed to death by 2 inmates, which meant that they needed to have different housing. So a new death row was constructed in 1992, coinciding with the relocation of the inmates from Union Correctional to the new Florida State Prison. That's when they realized that there's got to be a separation. You can't just house certain people together too close. So the present day facility actually at Union Correction still uses a lot of the older buildings. And the prison has a range of facilities. They have a hearing impaired and an elderly, and they have their own kind of space. They also have a variety of living residents, such as cell units, housing units, and then self-contained houses. Like I said, it is a very diverse population in this prison. It's very strange when I was researching it. But of course, that being said, there are still a lot of issues in this, within the system. A report, even as late as 1990, back to 1999, has, done plenty of detailed looks into this, and there's even been earlier ones as far as like the diversity into the Union Correctional Institute. The latest report stated that half the inmates were black, but most of the guards were white, leading to still some issues on the grounds for racial tension. Several officers and inmates reported cliques of racist guards and or inmates, distinguished it by the colored keychains that they would wear. And of course, this actually led to problems. Shocking, I know. Problems turned out to be far more significant, however, after a review of public records and court files revealed that over 100 black agency employees were involved in lawsuits alleging rampant racism and discrimination in the prison system. I looked into this. This is still an ongoing thing. The worst allegation, though, and when I read this, I had to read this 3 times. I did not think this was a real thing, but this is the worst allegation. A black recreational manager once arrived at his desk to find across his bulletin board the letters KKK on his bulletin board, and it also included the story dating back to 1993, so we're looking at 30 years ago, where inmates on death row were exposed to a man wearing a KKK-style white sheet walking by their cells. Now, I understand that people in prison have done something probably to get there, but they still need to be treated humanely, and whatever soulless human being thought that was a okay thing to do probably deserved to be put in there with them. And I'm going to leave it at that, because that is rude as hell. Now, in UCI, Union Correctional, is still in operation today in Raiford. And I mean, there have been some notable inmates who have gone through there. Some of which have been Daniel Cohen, who was a murderer and a possible serial killer. Leon Davis Jr., who was a serial killer and arsonist. Kevin D. Foster, who was actually murderer and leader of the Lords of Chaos. If you don't know what that was, it was a self-styled teen militia formed in April of 1996 in Fort Myers. They went on a really bad killing spree. I will probably talk about that in another podcast. Michael King, who was a convicted murderer of Denise Amber Lee. And then former inmates include none other than Mr. Ted Bundy himself. That's the most notable one. Of course, we all know about Ted Bundy. And then I can't say his name, but it's Giuseppe Zangra, the attempted assassin of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and assassin of Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. So, these people have seen people come and go. So, the prison has held a lot of different people. It still holds a lot of different people. It's a very diverse place, Union Correctional Institute, that sits in Raiford. And I'm sure if the walls could talk, we'd probably run away screaming in less than 5 seconds. But like I said, Raiford Prison, Union Correctional Institute, is not the only one in Raiford. There is also another Raiford Prison. They both share that distinguishing name. It's really fun when you try to look it up for research. There's also the Florida State Prison, also otherwise known as Raiford Prison. It actually sits in Bradford County now, but it has a Raiford postal address, so that's why I'm including it in this Raiford podcast episode. It was known as Florida State Prison East Unit. It was really part of the Florida State Prison, now Union Correctional Institute. Again, this gets very confusing when you're trying to research. And this facility is also part of the Florida Department of Corrections, located on State Road 16, right across the border from Union County. And it opened in 1961, even though it wasn't actually completed until 1968. And a maximum population of over 1,400 inmates. It is also one of the largest in the state of Florida. It does house one of 2 male death row cell blocks in the state of Florida and the execution chamber. So, it is actually known mostly for that. Now, when they are on death watch, anybody on death watch is taken to this Raiford prison after their death warrant is signed by the governor and they are awaiting actual execution. Lethal injection, by the way, is the standard of method of execution in the state of Florida as of 2000. The electric chair can still be used by request. Florida State Prison sits in the center of several other prisons. It's just across the river from the Union Correctional Institute. It is surrounded by the New River Correctional Institute, the New River O Unit, FSP West Unit, all of which have eventually closed to now become Florida State Prison. Even though Union Correctional Institute is kind of on the same property, just north of it, of course they are different. Like I said that. But of course they both have the same Raiford or a Raiford address. It's very interesting. Florida State Prison is the only Florida prison that officially has the name prison in its actual name. Everything else is Correctional Institute or Correctional Facility. By the way, if it is a correctional facility, it is a privately contracted prison. If it is a correctional institute, it is through the state of wherever it's being run. Fun fact. Now, Florida State Prison is, like I said, a much larger prison. They do hold a much harsher population. It is a newer prison. But they do have some very notable prisoners in there, actually, right now. Trayvon Newsom is sentenced for life without parole for the murder of, I can't say his name, but y'all know who I'm talking about, Extension. He was the rapper. And then Jeffrey Hutchinson, who is a convicted mass murderer. He's on death row. He was the one who was sentenced for the quadruple homicide in Crestview, Florida, back in 1998. He was an Army veteran who shot a bunch of people. But they've also had some notable former prisoners. Let's see. Who would you guys know? Charles Ponzi. Ponzi schemes. Paul John Knowles. He was a serial killer and a rapist who served time prior to his murders there. A couple politicians who have been here. Charles Nelson, who is the stepbrother of Trapper Nelson, who I talked about from South Florida, who lived in Loxahatchee. He was actually convicted of murder and held here. And then, of course, since this is the main place for executions, Ted Bundy was actually executed at Florida State Prison. So was Gary Ray Bowles. He was the American serial killer who was known as the I-95 serial killer. He was convicted here. A lot of people that I've talked about in these episodes. David Allen Gore, he was killed here. He was the one that murdered. He was murdering back in Vero Beach in Indian River County. He murdered some teenagers. He was lethal injection on April 12th, 2012. I didn't realize it was that long ago. I thought it was longer than that. I didn't realize it's been just that short of a time. Wow, you don't actually realize. I knew people sat on death row, but I didn't realize it was like that long. Danny Rowling, the Gainesville Ripper, was put to death by lethal injection at Florida State Prison on October 25th, 2006 here. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that they sat there that long. I don't know why. And then a couple people, sat there and just died. Like Otis Toole, he was an American serial killer. Him and Henry Lee Lucas worked together. They're the ones that, why we have a code Adam. He died in the prison of cirrhosis in 1996. So, there are some that just don't make it completely to death row, but die waiting on death row that have sat in this prison. Again, if these prisons could talk, I'm sure we would not want to hear what they have to say fully and for what all they've seen. But this is the main, if someone is sentenced to death, this is where it will happen in the state of Florida. But Raiford is actually not a bad town. I always just thought it was a town of, I just thought prison sat there. I didn't know that when you actually drove through it, it's actually a really nice town. I'm not even going to lie to you guys. And so when I started doing research, and the only reason I did research is because I actually drove through it recently. And, there's actually it's a really nice area. I mean, there's not a ton there. And it is mostly known for its prisons. But there's a little hideaway nature area not far from it that you can explore, that sits just up north. There is a really cool little, I hate to say it, there's actually a really cute little wedding venue that I drove past. And so it's actually a really nice little town that, you would just drive through and all you think of is, oh, this is prisons. And so I wanted to give Raiford its, kind of its due, that, it's more than just a town of prisons. I just, I thought the same thing when I was going to drive by. I just thought I would see massive buildings, with prisons and prisoners. And no, it's actually got a really interesting history. It's been there a lot longer than I thought. I thought that they built a prison and the town was around it, and I was just very much wrong. It's actually got a unique history. It's got some really, really nice old buildings. And, it's a quaint little town. So, I wouldn't say spend a weekend there, but I would say if you're just looking for a little bit of Florida history and, or you're into prison history, definitely give Raiford a drive-through. On your way to Alachua or going towards Gainesville, or if you're on your way over to the Panhandle, there's some really interesting country out there, guys. And, don't just do like I did and think, oh, it's just prisons. It's not. It's a quaint little town with, some really nice people. And, well, yes, let's face it, the economy of the town is basically built on prisons. It's there for a reason. And, it's not a bad place. I just wanted to talk about somewhere different today in this podcast, and point out another little small town that I don't think gets any justice, because then you hear Raiford, you really do associate it with prisons. Oh, Florida man. Raiford, you're full of them. But today we're actually going to talk about a Florida man that's actually trending. Have you guys seen about this boat captain down in Punta Gorda who boarded a kid's boat? What in the... Okay. If you have not, I'm not going to go into the details because this will be a whole nother 30-minute podcast, but if you've not seen this, look this up. Thanks to the power of internet, they have already gotten this guy's, charter and everything. It says temporarily closed, which I'm sure that's him just saving his own ass, but this guy boarded this kid's boat without permission because he thought that, I don't know if he just was trying to show off or if he was just trying to be an ass or what, but he boarded this kid's boat and basically assaulted this kid, and the kid remained calm. He was, he was polite about it. He was just trying to just get the guy off his boat. And, on the boat, there's these other guys who are also captains, supposedly, and none of them are going to step in on this kid. And, so, yeah, I think Florida Man of the Year goes to this, I think his name is Brock Horner, this supposed captain who does fishing charters. No, I expect Florida Man to be dumb. I expect Florida Man to do something stupid. I expect Florida Man to be high on drugs and, you want to roll your eyes at him. This Florida Man almost effed around and found out. So do not be like this guy. We have enough stupid people in the world. We have enough. Don't do this. Just don't be like this guy. But yeah, look up this boat charter, and it's trending, so you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. But this week's Florida Man, probably the year, goes to this idiot down in Punta Gorda who decided to board a kid's boat while he was just fishing under the intercoastal and try to act macho. Don't do that. Don't be this Florida Man. And I don't even think he was drinking. He might have been drinking, but I don't think, just stupid. Just don't do this, guys. Don't be that asshole. So, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about that Raiford is more than just prisons. That is a small town in Florida. And I hope you guys learned how not to behave when fishing. And I hope you guys come back next week for another fun episode. If you guys have any suggestions, again, hit me up on social media, or, you can email me, find me on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, plenty of social media, plenty of ways to get in touch. Love hearing from you guys. I hope you guys have a great week. Don't forget to drink water. It's getting a little bit warmer. Stay hydrated. Wear your sunscreen. And as always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.